Being a marketer's no sweat. You just have to manage dozens of channels, launch hundreds of campaigns, score thousands of leads, and okay, fine, it's a lot of sweat. Unless you have HubSpot's AI-powered marketing tools to help you do all that and more. Get started at HubSpot.com/marketers.
Imagine what's possible when learning doesn't get in the way of life. At Capella University, our game-changing FlexPath learning format lets you set your own deadline so you can learn at a time and pace that works for you. It's an education you can tailor to your schedule. That means you don't have to put your life on hold to pursue your professional goals. Instead, enjoy learning your way and earn your degree without missing a beat. A different future is closer than you think with Capella University. Learn more at capella.edu.
Hello and welcome to the Paddock and the Pavilion with me, your host, Stephen Wallace. On today's show, I'm joined by Joe McGrath from Melbourne, who is going to tell us all about the Lexus Melbourne Cup Tour. Hello, Joe. How are you in Australia?
Great, thanks, Stephen. Yes, we're getting to an exciting time of year, certainly with a lot of sport, Australian rules football, rugby league, and, of course, the Melbourne Spring Carnival, culminating with the Melbourne Cup Carnival in, the start of November. And, of course, we're heading towards the 164th consecutive running of the Lexus Melbourne Cup.
Yes, the race that stops the nation is going to be run this year on the 5th of November, Tuesday.
Yes, it is. And it is the first Tuesday in November. And it's always at 3:00. But as I have said to numerous people as we travel around with the Lexus Melbourne Cup, the anomaly with all that is that the first Melbourne Cup was actually run on a Thursday way back in 1861. So, and it did so it was a Saturday a couple of years after that, but for about 14, 15 years. And then in 1875, it moved to the second Tuesday in November. And then in 1876, the first Tuesday in November. So, and it's stayed there ever since.
Well, I think you've done well keeping it since the 1870s on the first Tuesday. So you're not done too bad.
Yes, well, it's such a cultural event in Australia. It's one of the biggest sporting events, but certainly in terms of how it engages the Australian population, it from every inch of the country, there's every town and every quarter is well and truly focused on that horse race that stops the nation, 24 runners at Flemington at 3:00. And they come from all corners of the globe to run in it. And it's become truly an international event.
Thanks for that. Many of our listeners might not know much about the Lexus Melbourne Cup Tour, and I'm sure in this podcast we're going to find out a lot more about that. But to start with, what can you tell me about Joe McGrath? You must be a big racing fan.
Yes, look, Stephen, I grew up in a racing family, well-known Victorian racing family in Melbourne, and father was a rails bookmaker. My brother Jim McGrath is known to many people over that side of the world in the UK, working with the BBC.
Oh, I didn't realise that. You're Jim McGrath's brother.
So there's 7 kids in our family. He's the oldest and I'm the youngest. And so we grew up with racing very much in and around our family, and it was just form guides and broadcast in the kitchen of talkback radio around racing. And it really was, to me, I thought that everyone grew up this way in terms of having it piped through your kitchen and people going to the track on a Saturday and all the rest of it. And but I quickly realized this wasn't actually how everyone operated. But look, I got brought up in it. We were in a horse breeding, horse racing, as I said, bookmaking, journalism, race calling. I've got a nephew who's a trainer. So it's been sort of, there was no escaping it. But at the same time, it's been my passion, and I've loved it. And I feel very fortunate that, each day I wake up, that's what I do in and around, horse racing, promoting the Melbourne Cup, Melbourne Cup Carnival, it's, it is a pleasure.
So can you remember the first Melbourne Cup that you remember or went to as well?
I do. Yeah, I do. I think it was Gold and Black in 1977. I do remember listening to the 1976 Melbourne Cup, which was probably the wettest Melbourne Cup, won by a horse called Vanderham, a New Zealand horse who was an absolute swimmer. And the rain, if it was a normal race meeting, it would have been called off. But there's very famous images in and around that first Tuesday in November back in 1976. And Vanderham, the race caller, you could put it on YouTube and have a look. It's race callers couldn't identify horses. Pretty much they were second guessing a bit of halfway down the straight. But so I can remember that and just thinking, wow. But my family had a runner in the Melbourne Cup in 1967, and I remember growing up with all that. Ran seventh, ridden by Harry White, who was a 4-time winner of the Melbourne Cup in later stages in the 1970s. But I knew it was a very important, a very big deal, and it was game on when you got to around November. And so maybe from a very early age, I sort of got drawn into that, and been very fortunate to progress along those lines and to be now involved in promoting Lexus Melbourne Cup and through the Lexus Melbourne Cup Tour is a pleasure.
So what's your official role and how did you get the job in the first place?
Well, my role is Lexus Melbourne Cup Tour manager and keeper of the cup, as they say. And I suppose in a lot of things in life, there's sliding doors moment. And I was director of the Racing Museum at Caulfield, and there was an opportunity that I had an inquiry from a PR company that they were taking the Melbourne Cup on the road. And these inquiries kept coming in on 2-day intervals, more or less. And got to the end and I said, what are you doing? You're asking all these questions. And they said, we're putting the cup out on the road. And, I was sort of pretty obsessed with the cup growing up. And I said, look, if you need someone to talk about it, let me know. And sure enough, they did about 2 weeks later. And we went on the road in that first year in 2003, which was Makybe Diva's first Melbourne Cup. She, of course, won 3 Melbourne Cups in a row. And, I remember coming back to Melbourne and giving a bit of a report back to the committee and the chairman, Rod Fitzroy, at the time. And I said, look, this is not a sporting icon in this country. It's a cultural phenomenon. And, from schools to hospitals to outback communities, Australia, everywhere we went in that first year, it just hit you like a, train that this is pretty important to a lot of people. And, we have a responsibility, even though it isn't Melbourne by name, it's certainly Australian by nature. And on Melbourne Cup Day, Stephen, there is over about 45 race clubs around the country that race on that day as well, which is quite a high volume of race meetings, let alone in New Zealand. And for a lot of them, it's their biggest race day of the year. So, so taking it out on the road in that first instance, was pretty immediate. The interesting thing is the cup value at the time was 75,000 Australian dollars. It's now 750,000 Australian dollars. It's just gone through the roof, and it'd probably be the only item of its nature made on an annual basis with, I think it's about 1.75 kilos of 18 karat gold. So it's quite significant, and we make sure we keep a close eye on it.
I bet you do. Now, how do you decide all the different places you go to? Because you go to such a wide range of small towns and cities. You're going abroad.
Yes, well, we take applications for the tour in the earlier part of the year. Let's call it 1st of February up until Easter. And we'll take those applications, and the great thing about it is Australia is such a big country, and I suppose the second thing is, so there's a lot of dots on the map, I call it, and the second thing is the history connected with the race goes back to the gold rush back in 1861. So there's a lot of connections across the country that has, particular horses come from that town, or a jockey or a trainer. And this goes way back to the 1860s. So we've got a lot of levers to pull when we take the Cup into those communities. And based on the strength of the submissions that come in, we will, look for a balanced program. We also integrate with capital cities and international destinations where we'll take the Cup, with a different purpose, but in some ways it certainly promoting and the awareness levels, promoting the awareness levels around the Melbourne Cup, but also recruiting horses for the Melbourne Cup Carnival as well, which is very important to the Victoria Racing Club as well. So depending on where we're going and what we're doing, it can serve a multitude of purposes with different motivations.
So when did this year's tour start?
Well, we launched on the 28th of May at Flemington. Big crowd there, and we had Damien Oliver, 3-time winner of the Cup, Glenn Boss, Michelle Payne, Jamie Carr, John Letts, Corey Brown, all connected with Flemington and the Melbourne Cup, Lexus Melbourne Cup. And then we went on the road to Japan soon after, Tokyo and Sapporo. And then we went off to New York. I went to the Belmont Gold Cup, which was a win and you're in race. So a horse called the Grey Wizard won the race, and he got a ticket into the Melbourne Cup. And we have a number of these races across the globe.
You have the Ebor, don't you?
Yeah, the Ebor as well. And we also had Matt Hill, who's our preeminent race caller in this part of the world. He called the Belmont Gold Cup which was at Saratoga, because they're doing renovations at Belmont. And we take the Cup, and people are quite fascinated with it. And certainly, we plot our course across the globe. And I think at the moment we're in the last quarter, last 10 destinations as we approach Flemington for that first Tuesday in November.
When you go abroad, are you selecting countries who have got previous winners of the race? Is that the main aim?
Well, I mean, in the case of the US, I mean, there hasn't been a winner trained out of the US, but certainly it's a market that we're wanting to target as a club. But we will go to places. I mean, Europe. You've got winners from Germany, France, UK, Ireland, but there's also winners in Japan, in Asia, and we will go to those areas. I mean, to look to recruit horses to come out to Flemington. Lee Jordan, our executive general manager of racing, is very front and center in that program. And we'll do other commercial activations in and around our sponsors in certain jurisdictions as well, and have media. We'll create our own content along the way, and fortunately, it is quite a globally recognized race, and there's a lot of participants, and whether or not that's Ryan Moore, whether that's Frankie Dettori, Willie Mullins from Ireland, Ed Dunlop from the UK, who've all had a bit of a taste of Flemington and the Melbourne Cup in various shapes and forms. And so we have, we do come across a lot of people along the way.
Where did you come this time when you went to the UK? Because I know back in 2018, when I was working at the National Horse Racing Museum, I had the white gloves on and got hold of the Cup.
Well, the Cup went to the Goodwood Festival, and also went to Ascot. for the King George, I think it was. Yeah. And, there was a bit of a hit and run sort of mission there for about 5 or 6 days, and then went onto Ireland, where they went to Naas and went to Galway, went to a number of different places throughout Ireland as well. And it's a fairly tight time frame when we do go abroad. It might be about 10 or 11 days, certainly to UK and Ireland, and it's putting as much in as you can to justify the trip. And certainly, we're promoting Melbourne Cup Carnival and Lexus Melbourne Cup, and you need to have a number of touch points along the way that you want to cover off.
And when people are lifting the cup, holding the cup, they've always got the white gloves on.
Yeah, and that's it's, a lot of people think that's a bit gimmicky, but when I was working at the Racing Museum, I was fascinated by everyone. Everything was handled with with white gloves. I thought, this is just amazing how they do this. And from old books to things back in the 1800s and so on, and different parts of the collection. And I thought, well, it is an 18-karat gold trophy that is, which is the most precious metal on the planet. And we do it. I mean, people have, grime, dirt, whatever, oils on their hands. People wear a lot of rings, and the actual gold does actually scratch. So it is a protocol measure that we put in place, and that's sort of how it is. A lot of people think, oh, they're kidding, but it's funny. A lot of other sports out here in Australia are wearing white gloves when the trophy comes onto centre court in the Australian Open and other sporting events, and you think, oh, that's interesting. But look, everyone looks after the cup really well, and it sits on a Jarrah wood base, which comes from Western Australia, and it weighs about 3.85 kilos. It's actually quite heavy to hold after a while. It has 3 handles representing your owner, trainer, and jockey, and it's after you move it around to 39 destinations and 6 countries, as we've done this year, it's we need to protect it, and so far, touch wood, we're going pretty well.
And I think we said off air, it's a new cup each year.
It is, and for a lot of people, they're surprised with that, because there's perpetual cup trophies, as we know, with certain sports, and they hold it for about 5 minutes at the presentation, then hand it back and get a miniature. But this trophy we actually present to the winning owner. I mean, as you could imagine, and certainly in this part of the world, Stephen, there's a lot of multiple owners that are in a particular horse. And if they're wanting to get smaller versions, 2/3 height version, we can get those made and, post race. And we did so 2 years ago with Gold Trip. I think we made about 21 of them. So, but they would be made of silver with gold plating. And so that's quite a production post event in servicing and getting those trophies made as well. So look, there are a number of trophies that you see around, past winners, and some of them are in museum in Canberra, some of them in race clubs, private collections, and they do pop up from time to time, and they tell a fascinating story connecting to the Melbourne Cup, and 163 winners already. There's a lot of stories to tell.
You do put out some great social media clips as the cup goes round the globe, I should say, and I particularly like the one where you went out to a place known as Wiley, a very small place.
Yes, look, I mean, there's so many. We've been to over to 640 destinations, and I suppose that you should state that there's 2 parts to the tour. One is taking the cup out on the road, and the second part is taking talent with us as well, who have won a Melbourne Cup or have got a story connected with the race. And it is about storytelling. as much as it is about showing the trophy, and the trophy is part of it. But connecting up with a past champion jockey we've got at the moment. The Cup has just come out of Murray Bridge. We've got two-time Melbourne Cup winning jockey and Corey Brown, who won in 2009 on a horse called Shocking, and also Rekindling in 2017. And he will, tell his story connected with the race, how he got the ride. He ran a very close second the year before on a horse called Bauer, and all but looked like he had won the race for Luca Kamani, and just got pipped on the post. And he'll tell you his story, how he had to endure 12 months of everyone promoting the race that he ran second in, and then he won it the next year, and of course he won it about 9 years later. But he had quite a horrific fall up at in Brisbane about 2017, 18, and his road to recovery has been quite extensive as well. But touching on those stories are quite uplifting and inspirational to many people.
And the Cup captures the imagination of young and old, because you're going out to schools, aren't you?
Yeah, and I mean the fascinating thing with that, from my perspective, is the knowledge base that young kids already have about the Melbourne Cup, and we will go to aged care facilities as well as to schools, as you say, and we'll do a lot of community events. We'll do street parades, we'll do fundraising events, we'll do cocktail parties, dinners, lunches, breakfasts, a whole range of things. But it is what we call in this part of the world the People's Cup, and it's the people's race, and it is about taking what is a cultural icon in this country out to the various community groups. And for a lot of them, it's, as I say, it's part of the cultural DNA in this country. And a lot of people, you don't mess around with the Melbourne Cup in terms of, what they think. And, we're very fortunate at Flemington to be able to promote it. There are other races in this country, but they don't seem to have the same reputation in terms of what it means to the country as the Melbourne Cup does. So anyone who's involved in that and the promoting of it, quickly realizes that, it's a bit of a big deal, certainly over here. And I often say, well, the fact that Aussies value it, it sort of pricks the ears of trainers and owners all around the world. It's a niche race over 2 miles, handicap conditions, and there's no shortage of people trying to win it.
The Tour seems to be and have become a great idea to keep the focus of the race in the minds of Australians and globally.
Yes, and I think in a marketing sense, it is quite extraordinary because, we launched the Tour back in May. We've been on the road since June. We're now coming up to October, last part of September, continuously having the Cup out on the road. I mean, there's so many different places where and examples of where the Cup has ended up on the front page of a local newspaper or even a major city newspaper 3 months out from the race, 2 months out from the race, or whatever it is. And to get that cut through in a marketing sense in promoting your event, let alone all other platforms that, we've got around us today, digital platforms and radio and free to air, it continues to be an item of interest. And as I say, because of what it means out here, people want to know. And if you have a personality who has actually won a cup or connected with the Melbourne Cup Carnival, it's quite extraordinary. We only recently announced Ariane Titmus, who has won 4 Olympic gold medals now, 3 individual, 1 team relay. She's now an ambassador for Flemington and the Melbourne Cup Carnival, and we did a photo shoot with her up in Brisbane recently, and front page of the main paper up in Brisbane. And it's quite the connection with other personalities and other sports. As I say, in that marketing sense, you can't buy the coverage that comes out of it. And we quickly realized that this is a pretty powerful sort of medium object and what it all means to people. And that, I did sort of realize that quite early on, and probably been very fortunate that I did grow up with it and knew that it was pretty important. And when that opportunity was to get on the road and take it out on the road, was mouthwatering, but I certainly didn't think that it would have the impact that it has, and let alone be as relevant as it is 23 years later.
You're not with the Cup all the time, are you?
No, we certainly engage security along the way, but we have different teams that come on and off the tour, and we break it up into legs. And it's a bit like a sporting game where fresh people come on and off the ground, and you need people to be fresh. Going on the road is exciting, and it's really good. But you find that it's quite exhausting for a lot of people, and you come back totally cooked in many ways, and you need to have changeover, fresh team, freshen up, get those people coming on maybe about 6 legs later. And the most challenging part of the Lexus Melbourne Cup Tour is the logistics and resourcing. If someone knows something about the Melbourne Cup, that's talking about it is probably should be relatively straightforward. Someone telling their story around the Melbourne Cup, but getting them to that point and ensuring that it all goes well is the ultimate challenge.
So we're recording here on the 20th of September. When does the Cup come home to Melbourne, and what happens to it in the week leading up to the race?
Well, it's in hot demand. It comes in and out of Melbourne, and it will be coming back. It's in South Australia at the moment. Murray Bridge will be in Adelaide tonight. It'll go to Morfettville Racetrack tomorrow, and then off to a beautiful winery region called Clare Valley. And that'll be there on Sunday, and 2-time Melbourne Cup winning jockey John Letts will be there. And then it'll come back into Melbourne and do a couple of things in and around Melbourne and one of our charity partners in Ronald McDonald House on Tuesday. And we'll have Michelle Payne there, the only female rider of a Melbourne Cup winner, will be in attendance, sharing her story. And the show rolls on. And it will do a number of events, and in particular that week leading into the first Tuesday in November, it's in and around Melbourne. The intensity is a lot higher, but the distance travelled is 10 Ks here, 15 Ks there, a few miles either side of Flemington, probably an hour by, car at any one point. And it's probably easier from a logistics point of view than what it is when you're trying to get the Cup to Japan or to the Curragh or to Galway or wherever it is. And but the demands are pretty high. We have a spreadsheet that if someone said, is the Cup doing anything on Friday the such and such in October? I said, yep, it is. Really? It's doing something. I said, yep, I can tell you where it'll be at 1:00 and where it'll be at 5:00. And I say to people in the office, I say, if you've got a reason you need the Cup, tell me now, because tomorrow there'll be there are constant requests. And that's from a media point of view, but also a commercial. A number of our partners we take to a number of different events, but then also the tour with the community side of things and leveraging our community aspect. I mean, it is a global event, but we're very fixated on taking the Cup to regional rural towns in Australia. And we have 24 regional rural towns, Stephen, and they're all part of what's called the Lexus Melbourne Cup Tour National Sweep. And when it gets to 8 days out from the race, we draw a barrier. We have a bit of a not a mock barrier. It's actually a real barrier draw for the towns connected with the Melbourne Cup Tour, and they draw a barrier. And then when the actual Lexus Melbourne Cup barrier draw takes place, the horse that is coinciding with their barrier is the horse that's running for their town. And if that horse wins, they will benefit 50,000 Australian dollars to a registered chosen charity. So there's a lot of interest in and around from a community level, leading into the first Tuesday in November. There's the race, but certainly the Cup is there's a lot of widespread interest.
So what's your role on race day? Do you go near the Cup on race day?
Well, right up until the Cup itself, even an hour. I mean, the race is at 3:00. The Cup is moving around different sponsor activations, media. There's photos with the Governor General. There's chairman suites. There's a whole range of different things, and we're across where it's going and what it's doing. And but we will host representatives from those 24 regional and rural towns, and they'll come into Melbourne, and we'll look after them on the day. So there's another colleague at Flemington, Tegan, and I will look after them and make sure they have a great day. And for a lot of them, they've never been to Flemington, let alone a Melbourne Cup. And the build up is it's pretty special. And we're getting emails daily from all these regional towns in particular. Excited to come into Melbourne on that Monday before. They'll go to Government House for a function, and then off to Flemington the next day. So, it's quite a build up, and it is an exciting time. And when you've worked on an event that's gone for 5.5 months, even the lead up before that in the tender process, there is a sense of satisfaction when you've got the day after, Lexus Melbourne Cup Day, the day after, you think, wow, that's, been quite an achievement. So very fortunate to have gone through that on 22 occasions, I should say. So, we're really looking forward to, another successful year.
It must be a job you really love. And will you be soon after November the 5th thinking about the 2025 Lexus Melbourne Cup Tour?
Well, the unusual thing with that, Stephen, as you know, there's a new cup presented every year, and ABC Bullion make the Melbourne Cup in Marrickville, just near Sydney Airport. We take possession of the 2025 Melbourne Cup 1 year and 1 week out from the race. So as we're leading into Melbourne Cup week this year, there will be the Tuesday before Penfolds Victoria Derby Day. So 1 week out from this year's race, they will hand over the 2025 Lexus Melbourne Cup trophy. So we don't have much downtime, and we put that trophy into this big old safe at Flemington. It's down in the basement, and it's got a very long key, and it looks like it's been there for 100 years. And we'll keep it safe, just ready to go if need be. So no rest for the wicked.
But you'll be back with it again in 2025.
Well, yeah. Look, we're quite excited about that, and we certainly regroup, work out what the motivations are for the club in 2025. Look at different parts of the business. It's something. It is an event that encapsulates all aspects of the business, and it is a vehicle for a platform for us to promote the Melbourne Cup Carnival into 2025. So a lot of things, it all comes down to the planning, and that first third of the year is where you brainstorm. You think this, what are we going to do here? We need to go to this part of the world with a cup, or with, this part of Australia. Then we'll look at the applications that come in. Our media partners, we do a lot with them as well. And, you plot a course and, set a plan in place. You go through all the approvals that internally, an executive team up to the chairman, chairman and the board. They all want to know what's going on, and they've all got a very vested interest in knowing what we're doing and, what fresh talent we're going to have next year, how we're going to, get those people involved. We've been very fortunate to have Damien Oliver, a 3-time Melbourne Cup winning jockey, join us this year. Jamie Carr, probably our, one of the elite female riders in the world, has been involved this year. Michelle Payne, a number of people, and we'll get them involved as well in promoting the Melbourne Cup Carnival and Lexus Melbourne Cup. So you have a little bit of a refresh, but it doesn't take too long before, and even there's already questions of what are we going to do in 2025, and we should do this or should do that. And, and you need to align an event like this up with budgets, and, that's always a process that you have to go through. And, but in terms of, in a marketing sense, taking one of the most sought after sporting trophies in the world, because it is, and one of the most iconic in this country, it is an event, the Lexus Melbourne Cup Tour, that has continued to evolve and continue to be, as I say, the envy of many sports, certainly in this country.
Have a fantastic day on Tuesday, November the 5th, the first Tuesday in November, Joe. And thank you very much for sharing all the information about the Lexus Melbourne Cup Tour. I'm sure listeners will now know much more about it. Thank you very much for joining me. And
we certainly encourage those who are into social media to, get on the different various platforms, and hashtag People's Cup, hashtag Melbourne Cup. And we're, the regular handles on Twitter and Instagram and other platforms, Facebook, Meta. So, Melbourne Cup, follow it on there. But no, thank you for your time, Stephen, and we look forward to another successful carnival ahead.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.